Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Munter, and as ever, I am your host. Now, usually on this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres one series at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 8th series, exploring the evolution of the vampire movie, and a new episode of our vampire series will drop every Friday right here on this podcast. But this is a little Halloween weekend bonus episode, a little special Halloween treat for you all, because this weekend saw the release, finally, here in the UK, for one of my favourite movies of the year. This is Zach Cregger's incredible new horror film, Barbarian. I saw Barbarian a few weeks ago, and it really was one of the most fun cinema experiences I've had in a long time. It's a brilliantly fun and unexpected movie. Now, later I'm going to be joined by Becky Darke to discuss the movie in detail, but first you're going to hear a little bit of my interview with the writer and director Zach Cregger. Now, we do have a very, very short, spoiler-free section of our interview, which anyone can listen to. But I will say right here at the top, Barbarian is a movie that is best to go into knowing as little as possible. And if you can, I would recommend going straight out to watch the movie before listening to any of this bonus episode, because honestly, part of the fun of Barbarian is its element of surprise. So go away and watch Barbarian, and then listen to these discussions. So, as I said, later on in the episode, I'll be joined by Becky Darke to discuss the film in depth. But first of all, I sat down with the writer and director, Zach Cregger. We jumped on a Zoom call. He was over in LA. We had been DMing over Twitter. I told him about how much I loved the movie, and he told me that he was a listener of the podcast, and he was actually listening to Evolution of Horror while he was in the process of making the film, which is absolutely awesome. So please enjoy my discussion with the writer and director of Barbarian, Zach Cregger. Hello, Zach Cregger. How are you doing?
I am thrilled to be here. I can honestly say, long-time listener.
Oh, that's so cool. Very surreal to hear, because I'm a huge fan of your film Barbarian.
Thank you so
I saw
much.
it last week at Fright Fest. Absolutely loved it. It was such a roller coaster ride. One of my favourite movies that I saw of the weekend. So thank you for making such a fun horror film.
My pleasure. My pleasure. You know, Fright Fest kind of came about because of your podcast, because I was listening to your podcast while we were filming, and you talked about Fright Fest so frequently and so glowingly, and I really wasn't familiar with it until you started talking about it, and so you put it on my radar.
Oh wow!
So, thank you.
That's cool. How was your time in London while you were down? Did you enjoy it?
It was great. It was great. My wife got pretty bad food poisoning, so that was a little bit of a drag. Kind of killed the day for us.
Oh, no.
But I'd only spent like one day in London prior to this year's Fright Fest, so it was kind of a tough balancing act of like seeing movies but also seeing the city. I didn't want to neglect seeing London, so yeah.
Totally fair. Before we get into the film itself, you know, as somebody who has made such a fun, scary roller coaster ride of a movie, I would love to know a bit about you as a horror movie fan. Do you remember your horror origin story and when you first fell in love with the genre?
I do. I remember the moment. I was at a friend's house. We were doing a sleepover. I was probably 12, and we watched The Shining, and that moment where you see the two little girls, like it was like an electric current went through my body, and I was so truly terrified for the first time by a movie. And then when it was over, I just wanted that feeling again. It was like the weirdest thing, because it's, you know, it's like unpleasant, but it's so visceral, and it so commands all of your mind that anything that takes me out of myself, you know, I'm hooked on. So I loved it.
That's awesome. Very cool. So tell me a little bit, and we're going to keep this first bit of the conversation fairly spoiler free, so we won't go into specifics, but what can you tell people that know nothing about this film, about Barbarian? Tell us a little bit about the film.
Ooh, well, there's different degrees of knowing nothing. Like when people see the trailer and kind of think they know what the movie is, I tend, my standard line is like, the trailer is really the tip of the iceberg. You know, the movie that is promised to you in the trailer is not the movie experience that you're going to have, hopefully, in the theater. And that's not to say that it's a bait and switch. I mean, it's true to the tone of the movie, but it's I promise you this movie is going to surprise you. You are not going to be able to predict what happens. You're not going to know where it's heading. Like you just won't, because I didn't know as I was writing it. So you just won't be ahead of the movie. I can say that with total confidence. If you haven't even seen the trailer, it's a dark, fucked up, fun horror movie. Hopefully you're going to laugh. Hopefully you're going to be scared, and you're going to be surprised. I don't think there's much more to say than that.
Absolutely. Perfectly put. I love it. So tell me, where on earth did the seed of this idea come from? I know you said to me already that you were almost kind of like writing that, you were thinking of ideas for this as you were writing it, right? Tell us a bit about the process of creating Barbarian.
It was kind of percolating in me over some time. I had read this book called The Gift of Fear by a security consultant named Gavin de Becker. And the book is it's a book that encourages women to pay attention to their subconscious and to really be hyper vigilant when they're interacting with men for like little tiny kind of micro red flags that men can give off in everyday interactions that could be harmless, but they could be nefarious. And the book is basically saying like, ignore these at your peril. And those little red flags could be things like when a man touches you in a non-sexual way that like you didn't initiate, or a man injects sexuality into a conversation that is otherwise, banal, or a man does you a favor that you didn't ask for. All of these like little things that he says are like very important to be aware of. And as I was reading, I was really struck by the realization that like I don't have to think about these sorts of things at all, because I'm a guy and half the population is not a potential threat to me. And that is just what a different psychic landscape I occupy than most women occupy. And I think I intellectually knew that, but as I was reading this book, I started to kind of dwell on it and just really like take that in. And so I wanted to just write a scene. I didn't want to write a movie. I'm here in my garage. This is where I wrote it. I was just like late at night with the lights down. I just want to write a scene where a woman enters a situation, and I wanted to load it with as many of those little red flags as possible. So I thought of a double booked Airbnb late at night. She has the choice to either sleep in her car or cohabitate with this man. And I was just going to give him a ton of these little microaggressions that like could be bad, could be nothing. And that was it. I didn't have any agenda. I didn't outline. It was just for me. And then as I was kind of typing, I was just following my fingers and just letting the story kind of go where it led. And this is the movie that came out of it. I never thought beyond the page I was on.
That's very cool. And the movie does such, I mean, I say this as a guy at least, but from my perspective, the movie seems to do such a good job of that, of being a horror movie about those red flags that women have to look out for, right? And yeah, I just wondered, how was that for you? Was that a worry for you as a guy writing this film about the experience of women in that way?
I'm so self-conscious of that, and I also am very self-conscious of the fact that when I talk about the origin of this, I'm citing a book written by another man, like didactically telling women how to behave. It's like, it's also fucked up. But you know what? Like, if a man can't make some sort of feminist art, then I think I take issue with that as well. I think men can be feminist just as much as women can be. And like, I wanted, this is what was on my mind. I wrote this in 2018. There was a lot going on, and I just wanted to write what was in me. I did not have an agenda with this movie. I just wanted to write it for me. And so that's how it went. And I was really solicitous of feedback from as many of the women in my life as possible. Like, does this feel true? When I was done with it and it turned out to be like a feature, I was like, how does this read to you? Does this feel like, phony or does this feel legit? And some of that feedback I implemented and made polishes and changes and things like that. So the best compliment I could get on this movie is when a woman comes up and tells me that it felt good or felt authentic. And that because if I fail in that regard, then the movie is a failure in my opinion. Like that is the goal of the movie, to feel right for women.
Obviously, another important element of Barbarian is Detroit as well. That everything is happening against this backdrop of this city that has seen a lot of hardships over the last 20 years. And I just wondered, was that something that you were deliberately kind of feeding in? Was this was this a kind of political, were you thinking kind of politically when you were kind of creating the backdrop, the setting of Detroit here?
I wasn't trying to do anything political with the setting. I've spent time in Detroit, and I've been in some of those neighborhoods. And so it's just like, it really leaves a mark on you. It's a really profoundly unique location. And so, it's scary there, and it felt like a good setting for this story. So, unfortunately, there's a lot of cities in America that you could swap in. You know, it's not unique. I say profoundly unique, but like, it's becoming less and less so, and that's too bad. But I didn't have any big political message. It's just what it is.
What was filming like? Were you filming this sort of during sort of COVID and everything? And like, how was the production generally when you were sort of filming this?
Well, we shot in the thick of COVID. It was in 2021. And we shot most of it in Bulgaria.
Oh, wow.
So all of our interiors are in Bulgaria. And then our street, our hero, like house front yard is in Bulgaria. We built 13 facades. And then we did go to Detroit, and we did shoot in Brightmoor for all of her like traveling through the neighborhood and stuff like that. So we did go and shoot the real place. Yeah, you know, it's COVID. It sucks to be in production in COVID. Everyone's got to get tested every day. You got to wear a mask at all times, and there's a ton of obnoxious protocols. And you know, it's fine. I mean, it's for the best. It's in the name of safety, but it was certainly inconvenient and a hassle.
Tell me, I would love to ask you a little bit about the casting. First of all, Bill Skarsgård, because I think there's something really interesting about him in that he is obviously this incredibly handsome man, this very charismatic man, but a lot of the horror community might know him as the guy that played the terrifying clown in It or whatever, right? And I just wondered, like, tell me a little about the decisions in casting him in that role.
Okay, well, let's have this conversation on the other side of our spoiler warning.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah, okay. Let's do it. All right, well, generally then, and I think we should move into spoilers soon because a lot of these questions probably will be plot heavy, but I guess what has it been like for you so far in terms of the audience reaction? You know, it played at Comic-Con, I believe, right? And then at Fright Fest, you know, how have you found the experience to be so far?
It has been kind of a dream come true. Like,
yeah.
You know, you make these things in a bubble. You know, it's just me and my editor just cutting it, thinking, I think this might be good. I think this is a scary scene. I'm not sure, you know, like,
yeah.
You just don't know. And then the first time I watched it with a crowd, people started screaming at the screen, and I was just over the moon. And then every time I've ever shown this with the crowd, we've gotten a huge reaction, and it has been like honestly one of the thrills of my life to be able to sit in a crowded theater and watch this movie. And I'm sure there's a moment where it won't play this way, but I've never seen it play bad. It's always gone over like gangbusters. So I feel a little self-conscious talking about it in these terms, but it's true, and it's like it feels great. It works.
That's very cool. And what's next for you after this? Anything you can tell us about what you're working on next? Are you going to stay in the horror genre next?
Well, the next immediate thing is, so I come from a sketch comedy background. I have a show here in the States called The Whitest Kids You Know, and so we actually have been working over the past few years on an animated feature film called Mars. So that's going to be coming out soon. And but as far as me as a individual director, I don't know. I'm writing two things. I'm writing a horror movie right now that is like way weirder than Barbarian, and I don't know if I'm going to pull it off just in the script. Like, we'll see. I'm writing a thriller. There's a sci-fi thing that I'm kind of circling right now. I don't know what's going to happen with me. I'm kind of up in the air at the moment.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I can't wait to see whatever you've got next. All right.
Thank you.
Let's talk spoilers. So I'll say spoiler alert for anyone listening. Go and watch the film and come back. Let me go back to that question that we were already on then while we were talking about it. Let's talk about casting. Tell me a little bit about your decisions in casting Bill Skarsgård as this guy who may or may not be this sinister predator, right, in the first act of the film.
Well, the beauty of having Bill in that role is that the moment he opens the door, everyone in the audience is going to be like, that's a bad guy, you know, because we have been conditioned to see evil in his eyes.
Yes.
And that's what you need. And so my only direction to Bill really for the whole duration of his thing is like, I was just like, don't ever be creepy. You know, you be nice. You stay friendly, you be disarming and charming and good, And the audience, the more you're nice, the more they're going to be convinced you're evil. And he totally was on board. And so that was the beautiful thing, because if he'd acted sinister, I think people would have maybe seen the switch that was coming.
Yeah.
But the you have to kind of play, I wanted to play with the tropes. And so, yeah. Yeah, and Roy Lee produced this movie. Roy Lee produced it, and so Bill was the first person that we went to with this. And Roy reached out to him and was like, "Read this script," and I got on a Zoom with him, and he was cool. So,
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a real dream come true.
I sort of loved that he, like you say, he kind of isn't acting sinister. He's kind of charming. Actually, what he reminded me of, I got kind of Norman Bates vibes from him in the first.
Yeah,
was that deliberate? Like, because I did feel as well in the way that there is that almost bait and switch after the first act, almost has a kind of structure of Psycho or something like that. But I just wondered if any cinematic influences were in your head at the time. Well,
Psycho for sure was in my head. This movie owes a lot to Psycho. And in fact, there was a scene in the shower when I don't know if you noticed, there's like a clumsy ADR where she's going into the bathroom and she says like, "I'm going to go wash up." Originally she goes, "I'm going to take a shower." And then I framed her in the shower just like the Psycho shower thing. But then when we did our first test screening, a lot of women were like, "She would never get naked and get in the shower like this." And so I was like, good call. Fair enough. Nice. That one's on me. So we had to take it out. Yeah, there's a lot of it. And Bill has this perfect kind of Anthony Perkins energy where he's like, he's attractive and repulsive, simultaneously. Yeah. And he has this kind of gentle quality that you're certain there's some lethality just underneath it. It was great.
And there is that feeling of like, oh shit, what film am I in at the moment when we go into the basement, right? And you feel like it could go one of several ways. Either Bill Skarsgård's character is going to turn out to be some psychopath, or am I hurtling into watching Martyrs or something all of a sudden, right? And I was personally very grateful that actually that we didn't get either of those two films in the end, right? But It must have been really fun kind of teasing what was going to happen at that moment, particularly with the reveal of the kind of the secret dungeon and all those corridors and everything.
Yeah, and again, that's a product of me not knowing what I'm doing as I'm writing, So like, when she opens the second door and we see the next staircase, that's me being like, "Oh no." Like I'm an audience member as I'm writing, like when I wrote it, she gets down into the tunnel and I'm still writing the movie where Bill is going to be the bad guy.
Right.
That was what I thought was happening. I didn't know what's going on down there. Mm-hmm. And then I get, okay, it's time for something to happen. Like if he's going to drop the hammer, this is where he's got to drop the hammer. And I was like, everybody's going to see this coming, like I've written a movie that is pretty predictable. And I was just like, I hate this. Like I was like mad at the script at that point. I was like, I've wasted 45 pages of my time. And then I was like, ugh, a big naked lady comes out and smashes his head into a million pieces. I was like, oh, that's fun. Like now I like it, but it's over, And so that really was like my experience of writing. It was just like trying to surprise myself.
That's amazing. So then like on top of that, is that when all the ideas came for the backstory to this movie? Like you say, the lady in the basement, the horrible serial killer man that's also down there with her, right? And like, did that sort of come to you gradually? This kind of rich backstory of this house, I suppose.
Yeah, I wish I could say it came to me gradually, but honestly, I feel like it was always there. Like I'm a big fan of like the David Lynch Catching the Big Fish book. I don't know if you're familiar with that and its process. But like, I think that this is a movie that was written that way. I meditated a lot. I did not want to use my mind at all. Mm-hmm. I tried to just move completely through my subconscious. And I think that like those things just kind of maybe existed from the beginning and I didn't even know it. And I was just discovering them. There's weird little breadcrumbs that I didn't even realize I'd put in the movie until I'd finished it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like Justin and Frank are the same person in my mind. It doesn't matter if people pick this up from watching it, but like he's confronting himself in that basement, when he's saying like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
There's a poster on the wall in Frank's bedroom of a beachscape and I put Hawaiian music in there. And when we meet Justin, he's in front of a beautiful beachscape. Mm-hmm. He's traveling back to himself in my opinion. Now, I don't expect any viewer to ever make these connections, and it's fine. That's not important to me, but it's on a subconscious level. It just, for me, it reinforces like, it's a reward of my own intuition. These little things, and like there's all kinds of happy accidents in this movie. Like he's singing this Donovan song about killing snakes, right? When we meet him, like it's all about like, I thought someone else would kill my snakes. I learned I had to kill them myself. And then Tess has this like snake pendant on her rearview mirror that is like, that is how we know we're back in Tess's world. And like, what does he do? He shoots her and he throws her off of a building. Like these are just weird happy accidents that like just kind of appeared a lot in this movie. And I don't know if they are just that accidents or if they were just kind of latent things that I was maybe on some level aware of what I was doing. I really don't know the answer to that.
That's awesome. And like you say, there are such vocal reactions from audiences so far when this plays. We all jumped out of our skin at certain moments in this film, particularly the first reveal of the woman in the basement, right? Mm-hmm. I just want this is something I'm kind of always interested in, and I love asking filmmakers about, but what do you think is the secret to executing a truly great scare, particularly a jump scare, right? Because I always feel like there are certain jump scares people might consider as cheap. Other people will talk about certain jump scares as being really well executed and well earned. I just wondered, in your opinion as a director, what is the secret to like executing a great scare like that? I
don't know. I don't think I'm particularly great at jump scares, honestly. In fact, I think like there's oh, thank you. I don't know if I agree with you. In fact, I think like the first two, let's call them jump scares, and like, one is about 6 minutes into the movie and one's about 12 minutes into the movie, and I feel like they're both pretty lame. And I watched them like I just didn't nail it. Now I'm glad they're in the movie because I want people to stay like on their toes and off balance, and that's cool. But I don't know a secret recipe. I do think that like, it's very similar to comedy, and I think that my training in comedy over the last decade and a half is not wasted because they're both about timing and tone and zigging when the audience expects you to zag. But I have yet to like crack the code and come up with a good, satisfying answer for what makes a good jump scare. It's really hard. And like, you'd be surprised how many editing iterations we go through and trying things out. And it's a bummer that you don't get to like test a movie 30 times where you can keep tweaking. I only got to test this twice. So, it's tough.
But and then there are also the other types of scares too, right? Which I love. The kind of almost like this sort of hereditary scare where something will suddenly come into focus, right? And there's a couple of times when you do that where the woman will slowly be emerging from the darkness. Now
that's my favorite thing. That's what I love. That's the horror moments of that I cherish the most are not jump scares. They're things. They're images that are just there for you to soak in and be afraid of. Carrie does it so well when you realize she's been standing in the attic the whole time. The Shining, the two little girls. That's not a jump scare. That's just a terrifying image, David Lynch does that so expertly. And so, that's my favorite stuff.
What about the comedy then? Like you come from a comedy background and this movie is genuinely funny as well. And that is something that I imagine must be hard to balance. Again, like kind of keeping the audience, keeping the audience in the palm of your hand tonally too, where, laughing when you need them to laugh, but also scaring them when you need to scare them and kind of juggling that balance. Does that come in the writing? Is that more an editing thing? Like how do you kind of pull that off?
It's a writing thing. And I don't think about it, and I don't mean that to sound like it's so easy for me. It's not. It's not easy for me, but I just don't. I try not to challenge myself too much, and I just like kind of go with my. There's that phrase, follow your bliss, and so as I'm writing, I just try and follow like what would be the most fun thing that would happen in this moment, and I just let myself give in to that, and I try not to question it until I'm done with the script, and then I go back and then I'm really hard on everything, But I just don't think too hard on these things. So if it feels like AJ needs to be kind of a funny dickhead in one moment and then like a really horrible, monster the next, then I just let that be what it is. I wish I had, again, I wish I had a more thoughtful intellectual answer for you, but it's just, for me, it's just about intuition.
Well, I think characters make such a huge difference in this movie too, right? Because I think in the first act, we're all genuinely rooting for Tess and we're so scared for her, right? And then in the second act, my friend who was so scared in the first half, she leant over to me in the second half when suddenly we had Justin Long in the basement, and she was like, well, at least we hate him, so I don't really mind what happens to him at this point.
Yeah, and that's great. I love that. Yeah. That's great. Also, I do have to say, so much of what makes his chapter work is just Justin's phenomenal ability. You know, he is an incredibly great actor. Like, he can be funny and terrifying and scared, like from second to second, and it doesn't feel forced. You know, I am so lucky to have had someone of his caliber in that role. Like, he's so good.
He's incredible. I've got to ask you as well, there's this trope that kind of reoccurs in horror a lot recently, it feels like, and I spoke about this earlier this year with Ty West's X, and it's a trope that occurs in this movie too, which is this idea of sort of older naked women being portrayed as monstrous, right? The kind of like the kind of monstrous or grotesque female form, I suppose, in some ways. You know, I guess this, like, what was the thought behind using that as your kind of monster in this film?
I think I'm sick of men killing women in movies, and I think I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to flip it. And this movie is about that. This is a movie about sexual predation, and I needed someone that would bring justice to AJ. You know, in the nursing scene, you know, that is him being raped. That is him atoning, you know, whether he wants it or not, for the damage that he's done. You know, it had to be a woman under there. She's a product of decades of sexual predation. She is the physicality. She's like the physical manifestation of decades and decades of sexual trauma. How could she be anything other than female? It's the only thing she could be. So to me, there wasn't a decision about that. That's just what this story is. You know, this is, I'm going to launch into a little thing here, but like, to me, like the Tess chapter and the AJ chapter are like two sides of the exact same coin, right? Because the Tess chapter is about a woman's need to be hyper vigilant and to protect herself against sexual aggression, right? Mm-hmm. She is constantly observing and notating and cataloging and recategorizing like the behavior of this man. So what is the opposite of that? The opposite of that is a man who is completely oblivious to his own behavior, who is not observant in the slightest bit, who is cruising through life just blindly hurting women. And so they belong together, these two chapters. It's not arbitrary to me. And so I wanted both of these characters to pass through the same eye of the same needle and you know, reckon with the same damage in a weird way. And so that's why she must be female, you know, this creature.
Yeah, and it's so perfect in the way that those two scenes mirror each other, where you've got Tess discovering the basement and seeing threat round every corner, and then you've got AJ discovering the basement and thinking square footage, right, and measuring everything, and it's like it's kind of a perfect summation there of the two.
And that is a callback to her on the couch with Bill when she says, like, if I had checked in first, you wouldn't even think twice. You would just march on in. And he's like, you just marched on in. She's like, yeah, it was scary. You know, like, that's the difference. That's the thesis of this movie.
We mentioned Psycho already, but I just wondered, is there anything else that you sort of took from cinematically? Any other influences that kind of, you know, came to you while you were creating this?
There's two. You know, I feel like the main spiritual ancestor of this movie is Audition, the Takashi Miike 1999 movie. You know, that's another movie that really explores male privilege, sexual aggression, and you know, female righteous justice. And it's a movie that does not follow conventional structure. That movie shocked the hell out of me when I saw it for the first time, and you know, it makes you think you're watching one movie, and then by the end you are not watching the movie you signed up for. And I thought that was great. So that one, and then to a lesser extent, just more of like I stole, and I'll be totally open about it. I just stole the visual motif from Angst, the 1983 Austrian film.
Oh yeah.
And I only stole that for one chapter, for the Richard Brake chapter, for the flashback to the 80s. Now I don't use the snoring cam that they use in Angst, but I my DP and I made him watch that, and I wanted to just follow Richard the way Angst follows its. I won't call him a protagonist because how could you? But that central character of that movie. So just from a visual storytelling thing, I use that.
I love that. That's very cool. And there's that great line towards the end after Tess escapes the house where they're talking about the woman and the man who sort of is the sort of drifter on the street. He says to her, "There are much worse things down there than her," right? Did you ever have in your head that we were going to be introduced to more characters? Were there any more monsters down there in that basement?
No. And I don't think I appreciated the weight that line would have on audiences. When I wrote that line, I didn't think too much on it. I was referring to Frank. But I realized on my first screening that, that's a very pregnant line of dialogue, and it triggers the imagination. So everyone's thinking there's a bigger, badder monster. And there is. That is true, but it's not what people think. And so I think that there's definitely a degree of disappointment that some people experience when they realize that he's referring to a frail old man in a bed. And I just had to decide that was okay with me. I love the tension that line creates, and I love the letdown that when we see it's just Richard Brake in bed he's 85 or 90, however old he is. Like, I think that's more interesting. But he is truly worse than the mother. He is a monster. He's a true monster. To me, the mother is one of the most sympathetic characters in the movie. She never had a chance. This is like she's tragic. So it's that was a tough one.
Well, it is, and I love that it kind of juggles that classic, like some of the best horror movies do that idea of who is the real monster in this, right? And there is that moment when your heart really goes out to her at the end when she is kind of like, when they've fallen off the tower together and you suddenly kind of really feel for that woman from the basement, and who is the real monster in your opinion in this movie? Is it actually AJ? Because by the end, I think we're all thinking that.
I'm not gonna say, but I mean that's the title of the movie, right? Like who is it referring to?
Yeah. Finally, I just want to ask you about the production design, I guess, and designing that the world beneath the house as well. Like, again, was that something that you were kind of thinking up in your head sort of structurally? Was it just designed to be this kind of surreal, never-ending sort of, hell-like location, I suppose? There are moments when, characters choose to go one way, but actually they could go the other, and this kind of thing. And like, how much of that space kind of was fully designed in your head, I suppose, when you...
Well, one of the so it took me about a year and a half to get anyone to attach to this movie, like on the producerial level. So I had a year and a half longer of just watching this movie in my head every night as I fell asleep, So by the time I, had hired my production designer, I knew exactly what was going on under that house. I had the ready to go. I knew the layout. I knew what it looked like. So it was very, very intentional. Now Rossi Bakeva, who was my art director, she crushed. I mean, she pulled a miracle out of her hat. That was all built on a sound stage, and it looks great. And but yeah, it was very planned out.
I love it. I noticed the audition. I felt like there was a little audition nod at one point when we saw the cages and what looked like a kind of vomit bowl in front of it as well. And I immediately thought of audition from that.
Right.
Well. But there's some.
You know what? I don't think that was intentional, but I love that you clocked that. Yeah.
There you go. I would love to finish by asking you, one of the things I'm really interested about on this podcast is the kind of history, the evolution of the genre and the way it shifts and changes. Horror has always been there. It's always been popular, but it really does feel like we're in a particular golden age of the genre right now. What do you think caused that?
Get Out did it all.
Oh, Get Out. Yeah.
It's like, it was such a groundbreaking, inspiring movie for me as well. Because it's so intelligent. It's so relevant. It's got an incredible message, but most importantly, it's just so fun, and that is so valuable to me. Like the idea of a horror movie that has value, cultural value, but most importantly is just a roller coaster ride that you can scream and laugh at. Is something I think really worthy of aspiring to. And I think that Jordan really just, he opened a huge door in my mind of what you can do now. And I mean, this is a direct descendant of Get Out, it just is.
I see that absolutely. And Get Out is one thing. Do you think that that's the reason why we've kind of been in this sort of what people call golden era? Is it because of what's been going on in the real world that has inspired more horror stories? Do you think that the culture has changed and that critics and people like that are embracing horror more than they used to? What's changed, do you think?
I don't know. What a great question. I don't know why horror feels healthy right now. I think you would know the answer to that better than I would, quite frankly.
It's hard to know, isn't it? It's really hard to know, but it's maybe it's because the world is a scary place right now. I don't know. It could be that. It could be a million other reasons, I'm sure. And there are maybe because of streaming and other things like that, maybe there are more opportunities now for more voices and more people to go and make their own horror movies, and so we're actually just getting more as well. And maybe that is why there's been a influx of good ones. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, Zach, thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a joy to chat to you, and I've got to finish by asking you, what is your favorite horror movie?
Oh my God! I mean, what a terrible question.
I know, right? Terrible.
It'll change by the day. I probably would have said The Shining for most of my life, and then there was recently I would have said Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. But you know what? Lately, I find myself watching Saint Maud again and again, and I think that is a slept-on masterpiece. I think that she has made something that is going to last forever. I think that movie's genius. It scared the hell out of me. It has one of the best. Talk about jump scares. That's the best jump scare I think I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I think that is right up there with like Exorcist 3. That is like profoundly effective. So right now I'm going to say Saint Maud. I think it's just too good.
I love that.
More people need to see that movie now.
100%. What a film. What an amazing final 3 seconds as well of that film. Absolutely astounding.
Oh,
yeah.
I loved it. It's a perfect movie.
It's a perfect movie. Zach Cregger, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a true dream to talk to you.
Now, his Zoom connection there was breaking up a bit at the end, but I think what I'm choosing to believe that he said there at the end was, thank you so much for having me. It's been a dream come true to talk to you. Yeah, thanks, Zach. I'll take that. It's thank you so much, first of all, to Zach Cregger for being on the podcast. What an absolute joy to chat to. He is somebody who rivals me in terms of his absolute boundless enthusiasm for the genre, as you can probably tell. But now it's time to get even more enthusiastic, because I am going to have a spoilerific deep dive discussion of Zach Cregger's Barbarian with my very good friend, Becky Darke. Hello, Becky.
Hi, Mike Munzer. How are you?
I am very good. It's Halloween weekend. I mean, it's our Christmas weekend, right? This is exciting.
Confusingly, for anybody who isn't listening to this in October, it's not Christmas, it's Halloween. But
Yes. We are recording this in the days leading up to Halloween. We've got loads of fun stuff happening. While people are listening to this, actually, we might actually be
on stage.
We're in Bradford hosting a screening. We're in London hosting a screening on Monday. We've got some treats.
So many treats. And you've got a quiz.
I've got a quiz. I mean, if I can't, make lots of things happen on this weekend, then when can I? That's the thing. So why not? I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Exactly.
So we're here to talk about Barbarian. Usually, when there's a new film, I would say let's start by doing spoiler free, and then we'll go spoilers. But I do feel like with this movie, you almost just want to go spoiler from the start, because I kind of...
Oh, okay, fine. I thought you were going to say spoiler free all the way, and I was like, you do realise that I am physically incapable of doing that.
Can you imagine with this movie how hard that would be?
Could you imagine? It'd be 3 minutes long. Okay, bye.
Yeah, because I honestly don't think I would want anyone to know anything about this movie, really. I think anyone listening, just go and watch it before you listen to us say anything about this film. Yeah, for the love of
God, switch us off now and go and watch it.
Yeah. I guess I just will say, as a first question, Barbarian, what do you think of it? Are you a fan? Would you recommend people go see it this weekend on Halloween?
2 very enthusiastic thumbs up. Yes. This is an absolute banger. It's probably my second favourite film of the year so far.
Amazing.
So, yes. Huge yes. Go and see it.
And I completely echo that. It is one of my faves of the year as well. What a strong year, though, right? As well. Unbelievable.
2022. I told you on texts or whenever, every 40 years, this is going to be it.
Yes.
So as long as I make it to 80, I'll have another vintage year.
2062 we'll be podcasting about that.
Fucking right we will.
I love it.
No, it's been 2022 has been quite magical, actually. We have been spoiled rotten.
Absolutely incredible. So, Barbarian. Becky, what's Barbarian all about?
So Tess is a young lady who has come to Detroit for an interview and she's from out of town, so she's gotten herself an Airbnb. And when she gets to the Airbnb, there's already somebody in it. And so there's been a mix-up with the bookings. Or has there? Could said Barbarian be Bill Skarsgård in the house? Maybe he could. Or... maybe it's somebody else who's already in the house.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's Justin Long who owns the house.
Who doesn't come into it until about an hour in.
This is a film of many parts.
Yes.
All of which are spectacular and beautifully woven together into a rich tapestry of fucked upness. It's
wonderful, isn't it? And people would have just heard my conversation with Zach Cregger, but he talked about how he basically just sat in his garage or something and just started writing this thing, this scenario that he had in his head about two people, accidentally ending up in the same Airbnb. And that's where it started. And it was almost going to be like a short. This self-contained little story.
Well, it sort of almost is a short, right?
Yeah, right. And you can believe that, right? But then he just sort of went, what will happen if I just keep going? And I think he almost let his kind of subconscious tell the story. He wasn't overthinking it. He was thinking about what would be the next craziest, scariest thing to happen. Okay, I'm in this basement. There's a dark corridor. A crazy naked woman comes out and, kills the shit out of somebody or something and that was the sort of the way he approached writing the whole film, which for some movies you might consider a bad thing, right? You might be that could be a complete mess.
Well,
but somehow it works.
It really works. And in beautiful contrast to the movie that I saw before I saw Barbarian the second time, which I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say how terrible it was.
You are.
Pray for the Devil was really, really bad.
Yeah, really bad.
And at one point in that screening, you leant over to me and said, it's like a movie has been written by algorithm.
Yes.
And you were so correct. And this, Barbarian, especially I think seeing it straight after, is just the absolute polar opposite of that, right? It is chaos, boiled down into sort of hour 40 or something. And there is nothing predictable or kind of run-of-the-mill about it at all. You never know what's going to happen from 1 minute to the next. And I have so much respect for that. So yeah, you're right. It could have gone horribly wrong, his writing tactic, but it went beautifully right.
And I think that is because if the storytelling is really good, all the performances are amazing, which I'm sure we'll talk about as we go, but also his direction is excellent. He is very good at executing scares and setting up what might be a potential scare, but then it goes somewhere different. There was a moment when I was like, are we going to be in some sort of Martyrs type scenario here with this horrible dirty mattress and a video camera?
Just never comes to anything.
Never comes to anything. It's brilliant the way in which he sort of teases our expectations throughout, I think.
And it looks so good. It's got sort of different visual styles throughout. But it's just so audacious the way it starts with the camera follows Tess as she sort of steps over the threshold. She decides that yes, she'll go inside the house. So the camera follows her through the wall, and then the title Barbarian just comes up on screen, and you're like, oh no, Bill Skarsgård's a barbarian. He's going to be really horrible to this apparently lovely girl. And that's where it starts, and it isn't where it ends.
That's where it starts. So let's talk about just that first section of the film, which, as brilliant as the whole film is, I think is when it's absolutely like at its best.
Yes,
I would say
I
when
agree.
it is Tess and Keith, right? Keith played by Bill Skarsgård. This kind of very classic, like, something I think we could probably all relate to in a way. Like, you've booked an Airbnb, the key isn't in the lockbox where they said it would be. You can't get hold of the Airbnb owner. Holy shit, someone's in there. What do you do? And this like amazing first third of the film is just social awkwardness horror, right? And is Bill Skarsgård a weirdo? Is he a wrong'un? Is he not? What did you think of that and the way that was played out with these two actors? I should say as well, it's Georgina Campbell that plays Tess, who's also unbelievable.
She is so good, and she's really, really recognisable. I think I saw her recently in All My Friends Hate Me.
Oh yeah,
which was good. So she's a British actress, I think, but she is...
Yeah, she's been in Casualty and Doctors.
There you go. Perfect. She'd have been in the bill if that still existed. Yeah, no, she's great. And they have a really excellent sort of awkward, flirty... At some point, it sort of gets a bit flirty after she lets her guard down a little bit. He is sort of charming and stuttery. That he's got a bit of a sort of like a Hugh Grant thing about him, like right at the beginning, and you just sort of don't know whether you can trust that. She definitely doesn't trust it, and she does the stuff that you always want people in horror movies to do. She looks in his wallet and takes a picture of his ID. She doesn't drink the drinks that he's offering her because it's possible he might have drugged it. Like, all of this stuff that... So Fresh is another example of a film that I didn't get on with this year because I thought it was devastatingly predictable and I knew everything that was going to happen about 30 seconds before it actually happened on screen. And that all stems from the fact that she goes to this bloke's house and starts drinking the cocktails. And the fact that Tess in this is like, she's so... just like smart, like she's a really kind of compelling character to kind of follow. And I was going to say at the beginning of the film, but actually you end up following her like throughout the whole thing. It's perfect. Like, there were murmurs in the screening earlier this week. There were murmurs of recognition when she's got the Airbnb messaging up on her phone trying to find the lockbox code. There are murmurs of recognition when she opens it, or like she's got the code wrong and then she opens it and the key isn't there. And I think it's really smart, a little bit like Host did with Zoom. I think that Barbarian is very smart to use something that is now as ubiquitous as Airbnb, because it's so recognisable. Oh
God, it's such a good point. Yeah, it's so well handled. And actually, again, Zach Cregger, as a bloke that wrote and directed this, right? It seems that he's tapped in really well to that, and he said it kind of stemmed from a book he read about all of the red flags that women have to constantly look out for in day-to-day life that men never have to, right? That there is always this kind of potential danger with literally half of the population with men. And he said he did have to consult with a lot of women in his life as he was writing the story, because and there were a few things
that he actually spoke to some women about their experiences. That's insane.
And there's a few things that he changed. Like, apparently initially there's a scene where after Tess has decided to come in and spend the night there, she has a shower. And partly because he wanted to do a kind of almost Psycho homage, because there's Psycho connections, right? And the women were like, there's no way that she'd get naked and have a shower. Yeah.
So she doesn't. She does the Neutrogena splash instead.
So he cut that out and changed it. So he did.
Great.
He did get help with some of that
That's
stuff.
Great.
But like, because of that, right? I mean, I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems kind of authentic, like in the way that these characters play off each other.
No, totally. And, it's very clever in creating a scenario where you understand why Tess is making the decisions that she's making. Like, she is in a really like shit situation that is like forcing her to kind of make these choices that you may not ordinarily make.
Yes.
And then it's also very clever at making it seem like she is in horrible danger and that Keith is a wrong-un, because he'll say things like, actually, there's no point in you looking for somewhere else to stay because there's a convention in town. And like the audience goes, ooh, because there's a convention. So she has to put her phone down. She has to stay for the night. So all of that is great. And it's like, for me, it walked the tightrope very nicely between me being incredulous about whether she would be actually making these decisions, putting her in a scenario where actually she's got very little choice and it's kind of a best of a bad scenario situation, and also keeping up that tension of, is he bad?
Yeah, and Bill Skarsgård, right? I mean, I'm assuming you've probably not watched it.
No, I have. I've seen it.
Oh, you have? Oh, my God.
Well,
oh
no,
my God.
because...
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take that. It's because it falls into the category of clowns that they make scary. So the scarier they try to make a clown, the less scary I actually find them.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Becky has a morbid phobia of clowns, where to the point where you do actively avoid a lot of movies about clowns, right?
Yeah, but it's fine. Yeah. Not the Tim Curry one. I can't do that one. But the newer one I can do, because he looks so sort of weird. Although there was the one scene in it when the little guy, is it Richie? Somebody with the glasses goes into the clown room, and I couldn't deal with that, and I had to fast forward it.
Yeah, fair. That's fair. But
Bill Skarsgård was very good.
Very good in it. And I think, again, it's clever casting, right? That, like, you've got this guy, he's very charming, very handsome, but also we already know him as somebody that has played a monster, right? And can do scary. And on paper, there's actually nothing. In fact, for a while, this guy almost seems too good to be true, right? He's so nice and so generous and so caring and considerate of her. And actually, it turns out he is actually that good. Like, there is nothing wrong with him.
But that in itself is an ick. Like it's like, women experience that. Boys being overly nice and overly helpful and overly considerate to try and sort of win you over or make you like indebted to them, so that if you then turn around and reject a later advance, they've sort of got all. But I was so nice to you. I went out to the car and got your case. I made you a cup of tea. I'm giving you the bed. I'm sleeping on the couch. You owe me.
Right.
And so all of that time, I'm thinking like, why are you being this nice? Like, what is your motive? What is your your ulterior motive? What do you want out of it? But you're right, it does just turn out that he's a really nice boy.
And then they spend the night in this house. He sleeps on the sofa. There's a creepy moment when he's making weird noises in his sleep, right?
Yes.
Which is brilliant. Great. Again, a kind of another sort of red herring scare, really. Like, it comes to nothing, right? And then there's this fascinating moment the next day when she walks out of the house and it's daylight on this street, and suddenly we see what that street looks like, right?
Yeah.
And we are in a really bad, deprived area of Detroit, right? And it's suddenly like, oh, every single house is derelict and unlivable on this house. It's the only house on the street that actually you could sort of live in, right? And so there is this feeling of like, oh wow, there is serious danger everywhere on this street as well, kind of thing, right, as well. And that's a really interesting thing, like the decision to kind of set this whole world in Detroit, right, as well, kind of feels very deliberate in that regard. It's so cool.
It does, yeah. And I wonder, because we'll come on to it, I know, but there's like a reason that this house has been like kept nice.
Yes.
And it's really like sinister, this idea that the neighborhood has deteriorated so much. And not only has this house been kept sort of lived in for like this slightly fucked up reason, but also just the idea, like, it's almost like, I thought it was almost like sort of Tim Burton-esque. It was like there was something like so sort of weird and twee about it. And then you're right, you look around and like the whole of the rest of the neighborhood is completely derelict and deserted. And you suddenly realize again, it's this woman on her own. Yeah, it's genius.
It's amazing, isn't it? And then there's that moment when she goes for a job interview. The woman that interviews her is worried for her, right, as well.
She's like, sorry, what?
Yeah, you're staying there?
Where?
Yeah. And then this is when shit really hits the fan, when she goes back to the house, right, and gets trapped in the cellar. That's what happens next, right? And then there's that whole sequence where she discovers the secret door and the corridor. She's left her phone upstairs and everything that happens.
She's got the key in her pocket, so she knows that when Keith comes back to the house, it's not in the lockbox, so he can't get in and save her.
Oh, it's so good. And this is the point when I just remember being like, I was so nervous. I was enjoying it so much. And I was like, what is this film going to become at this point? And I was so worried it was going to become like a getting tortured in the basement type movie.
This is where it looks like it might become Martyrs,
yes.
right? Is because what she does is she pulls this thing and this secret door opens, and behind the secret door is a bed and a camera and a bucket. The three things that you don't want to see in isolation in a hidden room.
Oh my
in a basement.
God. And she's so smart though. And like the things she does, like where she positions a mirror in order to cast some light down this pitch black corridor. And
again, that moment where she's looking into that pitch black and she just goes, nope.
Yeah.
And the whole audience goes, oh, thank God, because you're like, why are you going in there? And of course she doesn't.
Yeah.
So Keith comes back, like she bangs on the window, he sort of saves her, and then she tells him about the bed and the camera and the bucket, and he's like, look, I do believe you, but it's a crazy story, so I'm just going to go and look for myself. And she's like, cool, so I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But she doesn't leave because he's kind of cute and she's got a bit of a crush on him, maybe. And also, like, she's just a good person. And I think she doesn't want to leave him in a house where there's a bed and a camera and a bucket.
No.
And so he then, like, goes down to investigate and then sort of, like, disappears, and so she essentially like follows him down.
Well, there's also this like nightmare geography, right, of this place where it feels like it's dreamt up in someone's nightmare, where like not only is there a dark basement, then there's a hidden door and a corridor, then there's another door beyond that leads to a staircase that goes down, and it's like, what is this like never-ending tunnel of like hell that we're in here?
Yeah.
And throughout the film we just go deeper and deeper into this house, don't we, essentially? But yeah, that terrifying moment when Keith then comes running back saying something's chasing him, right? And it's such a good moment.
And it's all lit by, you know, the torch on her phone. And her performance in that sequence is amazing. Like, you can see like how unsteady on her feet she is, because she is literally like shaking from terror, and just knows that every single step she goes like further into this nightmare labyrinth under this house, that she's like more and more fucked up. And then she finds the cages.
Oh, the cages. And there's like sort of bowls of sick and stuff. And it's like, what is this? Yeah, it's so good, because again, you're just like, what is this film? And then as soon as you maybe start to think you've got a handle on what's happening here, so they're stuck in this basement, and then there's that amazing reveal of this like monstrous looking woman that attacks them, right? An amazing jump scare, and then bang, like that's it. That section of the film is over, right? And suddenly we're out,
and you're in what, like Southern California, driving along this beautiful sunny road with Justin Long singing along to pop music in a convertible. Like, amazing. Chef's kiss. Perfection.
It's perfection.
No notes.
What do you think of Justin Long and his character in this whole scenario?
What, like in general? Because like, it's Justin Long, isn't it? I love Justin Long.
Who doesn't
Doesn't
love
everyone
Justin
love Justin?
Long?
Right,
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Justin Long. That's all you need to say. Love him. I'm pretty sure he's like a legit scream queen by this point now as well. Like,
I would say
he's done some solid horror performances. Big fan. Always an absolute delight for Justin Long to turn up in anything. And he is so hideous and like hateful in this film, like the worst of the worst. He's worse, mate. Is he worse? No, he's not worse. He's not worse than the guy
serial killer.
No, the serial killer, incest rapist. No, he's not worse than that guy, but he's not far off. He's like the modern equivalent. It's really, really bad. And so you then just spend the next portion of the film, because it turns out that Justin Long is an actor. He has an allegation about sexual impropriety against him from a co-star. And he basically finds out when we first meet him driving along this road that he's been like cut from this show, right? So he is then scrambling because he doesn't have any income. He's this fucking like asshole actor, so he's got all these outlayings and stuff. So he needs to like make some money quick. So he needs to cover his legal fees. His financial guy like drops him. Oh. Couldn't happen to a nicer bloke, right? It's all going horribly, horribly wrong. And so then it turns out that he owns this house. So he has to then fly to Detroit to basically like liquidate a load of his properties to make some money to pay his legal fees on this rape charge. This is so perfect in so many ways, right? Because he is this incredibly horrible, sniveling, toxic mummy's boy. And it's the kind of icing on the cake as well that he also has chosen to invest his money in, I imagine, charging really high prices for a house in the middle of the most dangerous street in Detroit, right? Where every house is destroyed. There's no money behind this area. And some rich actor has decided to buy one house, not to live in, but just to rent as a source of income. I mean, it's just like perfect, isn't it, as well? And for his character. You say he's a mummy's boy, but then he's on the phone to his mum and she says, oh, well, when are we going to see you? It would be so nice. Like, Dad, me and Dad would love to see you. And he goes, oh, but, it's such a long way to come to Detroit. And he's literally in Detroit. Yeah, amazing. What a cunt. He's a cunt to everyone, isn't he? And there's a really horrible conversation, isn't there? You've seen it more recently than me, but he has a conversation with one of his mates, right, about the fact that he did, like, rape this woman, essentially, but tries to kind of excuse himself out of it, doesn't he? It's, again, I think smart writing and... because he's like admitting it to this bro mate in a bar, and the mate is actually like kind of like questioning him on it, like, well, did she say no? Did she ask you to stop? And Justin Long's like, well, yeah, at first, but then like she was like totally into it or whatever. Yeah, it's God, yeah, it's bad. It's horrendous. So the film does everything in its power to be like, this guy is an absolute cunt, right? It's so funny. And he is like, and he's the flip side to what everyone worried Bill Skarsgård character would be, right? Yeah, he is that person, essentially. It's really fascinating. And then we get this amazing kind of mirrored sequence of him going down into the basement and discovering the room, right? And it's so brilliant as well, the tonal balance that Zach Cregger gets. So funny. Yeah. And again, that difference, it's on the nose, but it's brilliantly done, where a woman is in that scenario and sees danger around every corner. A man goes into that scenario and he sees square footage and opportunity, basically. Exactly. And it's absolutely, he goes down there with his tape measure, doesn't he? It's when he comes up, so he's like... he goes down and he does the same thing. He discovers the bed and the camera and the bucket, and then he discovers like the staircase and stuff. And he is the beautiful comedy beat where he says something like, oh fuck, and then he comes back up and goes onto Google and like types in something like, does like underground space count as square footage for like rental purposes or something? And then he's like reading it through and he's like, oh, it doesn't. And then he's like, oh no, it does. Like if you add it on as like blah, 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 blah. And then literally grabs a tape measure and is then just like a bull in a china shop. He doesn't for a moment, like you say, he doesn't for a moment see any risk whatsoever about the fact that there is this fucking like torture porn room, literally, and he's just like measuring like around the bed around the stained bed, and like sits down on it at one point and like gets up and he's like ew, and like sort of like brushes off his jeans. It is just brilliant. And then like he like literally him sort of taking it down the stairs, and then he finds the cages and is like, what the fuck's going on down here? Just measures around the cages. It's perfect. And again, like, what a fun time in the cinema this is to watch with an audience, because like after that incredible
incredibly tense first 30 minutes, he really then breaks the tension with just, this is just so funny, this stuff, isn't it? It's just pure. And I remember you saying to me, like, I think it was you, maybe it was Louise, but one of you whispered to me, like, I'm not so scared about this because he's an arsehole, so if something happens to him, fine. This is a lot more bearable kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, it's true. It is like, you kind of don't mind what's about to happen to him at this point because he's been introduced as such a dickhead.
100%. If anything, the tension is, when is he going to get his fucking comeuppance?
Yeah. He does, right, pretty swiftly from that point.
Yeah, well, he gets basically thrown in this pit.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the sort of manhole cover, for want of a better word, like slams shut over it. And then Tess is in there too.
Yes.
So this is where your two like storylines converge, because he's thrown in the pit and Tess is already in the pit.
But then, right, am I not right? Am I wrong in thinking that at that point is when it then cuts and we go into flashback sequence all of a sudden? Does that happen then, or does that happen later on?
So I think first you get Mama coming with the bottle.
And Tess is like, you've got to drink it.
Yeah, you've got to. Don't you understand? She just wants you to be her baby.
Oh, God.
And then he causes a fuss, and Tess is like, look, if you get upset, she's going to get upset. So just calm the fuck down. Just drink the bottle, right? But he doesn't, because he's an arsehole. So he gets upset. And then Mum takes him out of the pit into like the weird room with like the breastfeeding video.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So we get all of that first.
Yeah, you get a lot of that. And then around that sort of time, you figure out that there's definitely some sort of weird because then Tess gets away, and then she meets the vagrant guy, like the homeless guy, is that right? And he says like something about incest babies, and then I think it flashes back to what is essentially then the most unbelievable tone shift again, because it essentially turns into an episode of Mindhunter. Yes,
it does. We're in like full serial killer Netflix show at this moment, right? Amazing. It flashes back, what, about 40 years maybe? I think they make references to maybe we're in Reagan's America, are we?
Sure,
so
yeah,
maybe the 1980s. And that street is completely transformed. It's like filled with residents and families, and it looks like this kind of pristine suburban street, doesn't it? But obviously owned by this absolutely terrifying, deranged man who sneaks into women's houses. Doesn't he like jimmy a window or something so that he can get back in it later? Is that right?
Yeah, he poses as a like a waterboard guy, like goes and so opens the lock on the window so he can go back in later.
So this man,
and also when we're first introduced to him, he's shopping at the supermarket for plastic sheets and like rubber gloves and newborn baby nappies. What?
Amazing. This guy's played by Richard Brake, who is just a terrifying looking man.
Scary man.
Me and Rob and Steph McKenna talked about him recently because he's in Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, playing a hideous human being in that very briefly as well. And we were like, he's just perfect at playing these like very scary, monstrous men.
He's got a good sort of almost like Ted Levine kind of voice, right? That really like deep, kind of.
Was she a great big fat person? Like that kind of voice.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so you're sort of piecing together, right, the history of this house via these different stories, I suppose. And the fact that, he essentially... So what's the upshot? That he has been kidnapping women, presumably raping them and creating babies with them, and he's been doing
then raping the babies.
And then raping the babies.
And then making more babies. And then babies.
And so what we get, however many decades later, is Mama. Our scary, monstrous woman, who is this very threatening presence when we first meet her, but then actually... you then start to kind of feel for her, right?
When she boops his nose, I'm like, oh God, no, it's really sad. Like, it's really sad.
It is really sad. And it's brilliant. I mean, it's hilarious. The moment when he has to like drink the breast milk and everything is unbelievable. It's all so funny. And then there's that creepy moment when he discovers Frank, right? The dad, who's kind of, by this point, he looks like he's immobile, is he? Like stuck in bed, basically on the brink of death at this point. And actually, that was another thing that Zach Cregger said, that he kind of wanted to draw a parallel between these two men, like, and Justin Long sort of saying to him, "You're disgusting, you're monstrous," whatever, is almost like him sort of saying that to himself at that point, you know?
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well, because he does say that he's monstrous, but that's after he's... Oh my god. Because he's got all of these VHS tapes that are labelled things like...
Woman from the supermarket, or...
Drugstore redhead, and like pregnant. Just pregnant is one of them. So Justin Long watches one of these tapes... And then he's like, oh, you know, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're monstrous. But it's interesting, when he first finds this guy, he's like, his sympathies are just automatically with this bloke. And I don't know if that's because like he's another man. I don't know if it's because Justin Long's character seems obsessed with trying to convince the world that he's a good person when actually he's like the worst person.
Yes.
So he sort of automatically, like when he first finds Frank in the bed and he's like, gets him some water, and then, and it's only later that he sort of watches this thing. And you're right, like there is this parallel between them. Like, actually, is there a huge difference between you abducting somebody and filming it in your fucking with the bucket, or like you like date raping somebody or whatever? Like it's all very much in one big hideous soup, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So it is really interesting, that dynamic between those two like gross men.
Yes, exactly. And equally kind of Tess almost kind of seeming to slightly understand Mama, as well. There are these two pairs of parallel characters in a sort of weird way, right? And of course, like Justin Long's character, AJ, he just proves himself worse and worse and worse as this final act goes on, doesn't he? Because obviously then he throws Tess to the lions, essentially, to save himself, right? And it's all just like that shocking final sequence where they climb up that tower and everything is just...
I can get away. I can get away if you slow her down.
Oh.
And then, oh my God, and then the shot when Mama like throws herself off of the top of the tower to like catch Tess because she's her baby.
Oh, Mama.
There's also the amazing bit where Mum like rips off... It's not nice for the homeless guy, obviously. It's horrible for him. But she rips off his arm and beats him to death with the bloody end.
Oh, yeah. Amazing. Well, that's the other thing, right?
Which is one of my favourite threats of all time. So it was really nice to see it like actually acted out on screen.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. That's the other thing, is that there's no shortage of kind of gross gore and body horror and stuff in this as well, right? It kind of
it's gross.
Ticks all the boxes, yeah. Who do you think is the barbarian that the title is referring to?
I think it's Frank.
Yeah. It kind of has to be. I mean,
it kind of has to be
in the
Frank.
Kind of gradient of barbarity.
Imagine if I was like Tess.
but Justin Long is
but also Justin Long
is up there, right? Or down there. Yeah, it is. What a fun film it is. Like the twists and turns and the way he comes from a comedy background, Zach Cregger, and very similar to Jordan Peele in that regard, I feel like. Like it has that kind of vibe of, it's a really funny, crowd-pleasing horror movie, isn't it?
But also you get Justin Long departing this world by having his squishy eyes pushed out with thumbs.
Satisfying.
So satisfying. I loved it.
Justin Long, that happens to him at the end of another film, doesn't it? Oh, Jeepers Creepers, the film we don't ever mention. But he ends up with no eyes at the end of that as well, doesn't he? Yeah, bless him. There you go. I mean, and you watched, because we watched this for the first time together a couple of months ago. You've since seen it a second time this week. What was the reception like? What was the crowd like in your screening? It was perfect.
So I took our friend Shelley. She hadn't seen it before. I was also with friend of the pod Lou Thomas and his lovely girlfriend Jess.
Amazing.
So I was the only one of the four who had seen it, and I had that beautiful experience of sitting there thinking, I know what's coming next, and like just sort of like not wanting to kind of be that like dickhead who is sort of like like looking at them really, really obviously, so they know something's coming, but just kind of subtly sort of just looking out the corner of my eye to see how somebody reacts to something that I know is coming up.
Yes.
So like when she finds the rope and she pulls the rope and like, you know what's behind the door.
Yes.
Or when she goes down in the tunnel and you can just hear Keith like screaming in the distance, and you still don't know if he's doing it all as a ruse to like get her down there into his like sex dungeon or whatever. And so it was really, really fun to have seen it and then watch it that second time, kind of knowing the beats that are coming up, but the reactions all through, because it was a really busy screening. It was hosted by Anna and the Final Girls. Anna Bogutskaya did a really great intro to it. And it was quite full, and it was like everybody was in that perfect, like, what the fuck kind of state, like all the way through it. Loads of laughter, loads of screams, loads of groans and like ews and all of that. Like it was the most fun. I really wish that you'd been there.
Oh, I really wish I had. I'm dying to see it.
But we had
again.
fun when we saw it.
We did. We had so much fun, didn't we? It's perfect for that. I'm so glad it's got a cinema release here and not just straight to streaming, actually, because it is perfect. And you're right about the Fresh parallel, like that it kind of did everything that Fresh didn't, in a way. And I enjoyed Fresh for what it was, but it didn't necessarily have any surprises. You kind of dread where it's going, and it goes exactly where you dread it's going. There's another movie like that too, A Wounded Fawn, that came out this year as well, about a man and a woman that go out to this cabin, and it's a date that ends up going badly, right? And that's another one where it's like it kind of goes where you're expecting. And I love that this movie just like fucked the rule book, basically. It was so good.
Honestly, that whatever it was, that sort of I don't know, like stream of consciousness approach. Like like you said at the start, like you're so right. It could go very wrong. It could just turn into a big mess. And this just felt like this. I don't know, like it's just such an experience, this film. Like I will watch this year after year after year, 100%. And I don't know that it'll ever get old. No,
agreed. And I will keep trying to watch it with people that have never seen it, right?
Yes, for sure.
That's what we need to do. We just need to dip in and out of cinemas and just watch other people watching it, I think, for the next few weeks.
We'll leave it a couple of years and we'll do it on Evolution of Horror Presents. And
let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Amazing. Well, there you go.
Plug.
There you go. I love it. There you go. I mean, it's incredible, right? And I really hope it does well. I hope lots of people go see it this weekend for Halloween.
I think with all the hype, then they must do. But yes, Halloween is the perfect weekend.
It really is. It really is. Amazing. Well, Becky, thank you so much for joining me to discuss this insane film. I've loved it.
Thank you for asking me. I couldn't have been happier.
And just, other than all of our events that we've got happening immediately this weekend, what else should people be looking out for, or where can people find you and more of your stuff out there online? Best place to find me, as always, is on Twitter. I am at Bunny Darke. I'm on Instagram as well, Bunny Darke. Patreon, Bunny Darke. In November, I might get some sleep, maybe. So maybe. I know. We can hope, right? Becky, thank you very much. Cheers. Bye. And that's it for our Barbarian bonus episode. Thank you so much for listening. And one more time, a huge thank you to my two brilliant guests, Becky Darke and the writer and director of Barbarian himself, Zach Cregger. So please do get in touch. I would love to know what you guys thought of this film. Did you love it as much as Becky and I? Or did you have any issues with it? I would love to hear from you guys. Drop me an email, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. Don't forget, you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the socials. And if you tuned in for the first time to listen to this Barbarian episode and you want to hear more from us, please hit that subscribe button. There are over 200 other episodes in which we deep dive into classic horror movies just like this one. Thank you so much for listening, and join us again soon for another episode of The Evolution of Horror.